Hi, my name is Miguel Martin del Campo, and today I will be presenting reviews on the book Becoming Mexican American: Ethnicity, Culture, and Identity in Chicano Los Angeles, 1900 to 1945, by George J. Sanchez. The first review comes from Isaiah Ambritz, who is one of my group members. And in his review, he talks about three main points about the book. The first the first part being how George Sanchez uses tables, graphs, maps to show the migration patterns of Mexicans migrating to the US and also like what part of Mexico they were coming from. And then the second part, he talks about how it's a tug of war competition with the US and Mexico, with the US trying to Americanize Mexican immigrants, and Mexico is trying to help them keep their culture rather than adapting to American culture. Then the third part Isaiah talks about is how people start, instead of becoming just Mexican, they are Mexican American, and they start mixing American with Mexican culture, making their own. For example, not being a traditional Catholic home and being a different religion. The next review is from Oscar J. Martinez from the University of Arizona. And just like Isaiah, Oscar also focuses on the three main points of the book, but he tells it differently. For the first part, he talks about how Mexican immigrants were basically isolated in LA and how they didn't have any opportunity to rise up. They were just stuck in poverty and they couldn't go up and provide more for their family. The second part Oscar talks about is how Amer- Americans were trying to take away Mexicans' culture and have them adapt to American culture, where and the Mexican government was trying to prevent Mexicans to adapt to American cultures. So it was just again a tug of war between Americans and Mexicans. And then the third part Oscar focuses on is how things change within the families and how not just not just how all the families are going to be a male dominated family. A lot of the Mexican families change. For example, just being from a male dominated household to being a woman head of the household, or just a single parent providing for their kids, and so on and so forth. The next review I'm going to talk about is from Zaragoza Vargas from Ohio State University. And his review also focuses on the three main parts of the book, but he focuses on the first part. He focuses on how Mexicans were migrating because of the high paying jobs that the Southwest was offering them, and how LA was growing into a big population. And then in the second part, he talks about like the other reviews, the tug of war between Mexican culture and American culture, and how Americans wanted Mexicans to adapt to the American culture and become Americanized, where the Mexican government wanted Mexicans to keep their culture. Then the third part, which I found really interesting, that Zaragoza talked about, was how when the Great Depression started, a lot of these Mexicans faced discrimination, and they faced one of the hardships was keeping a job because they were having a hard time finding jobs. And then because they were Mexican, they were discriminated, and the jobs were most likely going to a person of white color. The next review is from Ricardo Romo from the University of Texas at Austin. And his review focuses on J. Sanchez's examination on Mexican survival in Los Angeles, that is a city of glamour and is known for its industrial growth at the time. But what Ricardo also mentions in his review is all the sources George J. Sanchez used to write his book. For example, a lot of naturalization. He used a lot of naturalization records that came from the Southern California branch of National Archives that is located in Laguna Niguel. And then how George also uses other sources like uh, city direction directories and church files as well. The final review is from James Diego Vigil from the University of California, Los Angeles. And in his review, he talks about how Los Angeles was just a small town, and then people from the Mid East and the East started migrating towards to Los Angeles, and then also Mexican immigrants started migrating to Los Angeles, making it this multicultural city. And James also talks about how George J. Sanchez goes in depth with with like the neighborhoods and districts like Belvedere, and he shows how it was living in those neighborhoods and districts. And James also mentions a minor flaw in the book, which was George G. Sanchez not mentioning huge any huge influences that helped shape Los Angeles. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation.